I'm Brittany Lewis with Forbes Breaking News. Representative Jamie Raskin spoke about authoritarianism during a House Judiciary Committee hearing on Thursday. He asked a witness about, quote, memory laws in Europe. For example, in Russia, where discussions of past Stalinist atrocities are not allowed. The witness compared this to discussions about slavery and civil rights in the United States. Raskin pivoted to an educator who was targeted for teaching children about systemic racism. Take a listen to the exchange.
I would actually invite the ranking member, if she would like to go now, if you want to take your 5 minutes for questioning. Okay, well, I will go first then. I don't know if Professor Snyder is still out there. I'm very curious about what you said about memory laws as being a hallmark of authoritarian regimes attempting to rewrite the past, which I suppose is one of George Orwell's insights in 1984. How do you connect what's been going on with these laws against teaching critical race theory to the memory laws that are taking place in Europe today and did take place in Europe in the 1930s?
Okay, thank you. I am still here and glad to be here. It's really a very simple connection to make. So as I was trying to stress in my earlier remarks, history is inherently discomforting. History is inherently divisive. If you read a good history book, it's always going to leave you slightly unsettled. It's going to leave you not where you thought you were going to be. And this is very important to the possibility of democracy, precisely because good history books and good history teachers leave people unsettled and then bring them to a new place. They enable the kinds of conversations which allow us to recognize one another as citizens, to learn from one another, and to make good policy which heads towards the future. The way to prevent that sort of thing, as dictators and aspiring dictators know, is to fasten on the subject in history which is hardest to handle and put it entirely off limits. If you're able to do that in a general way, then you end up with a citizenry which falls back onto its own assumptions about who's innocent and who's guilty. You end up with a citizenry that's unable to talk to one another, which makes it, of course, much easier for you to rule. And also you end up with a citizenry which is much easier to polarize when necessary, because they just don't have the practice of recognizing that history is complicated and that those complications in history mean that other people have other points of view. So the things that I've said are grasped by authoritarians and aspiring authoritarians who just apply it in a negative way. In Russia, as I think I might have said, the divisive issues have to do with Stalinism. They have to do with the Stalinist terror of the 1930s, the famine in Ukraine, the mass killings of 1937, 1938. They also have to do with Stalin's choice to become a de facto ally with Hitler in 1939. These are the single most divisive issues for an aspiring dictator like Putin, or a real dictator like Putin, because, of course, remember, the word divisive is ultimately going to be defined by the government itself, not by the people. The way that Putin presents these laws is to say that these kinds of things are uncomfortable for Russians. Therefore, it's the government's responsibility to get out in front and censor and make sure the correct view is put across. During the extreme situation of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, we see just how far this can go, with there being essentially no independent media, no possible discussion of any of these issues. But the central commonality in all these memory law situations is that you find the issue which the people would really have to understand to be a democracy, you put that off limits. In the United States, that issue is obviously the Civil War, the history of racism, the history of Reconstruction, the history of voter suppression. That is the issue of relations between Black people and white people, the issue of full citizenry. That is the issue which makes it easier or harder for Americans to understand one another. That is the issue which a lot of folks find it difficult to confront. So it is the issue which is uncomfortable. So therefore, the one that has to be central.
I appreciate that very much, and it's a perfect entry point for me to go back to Dr. Whitfield. If you would describe, if you don't mind, some of your personal experience and how your contract ended up being terminated, because I think it was about something related to what Professor Snyder just said. It dealt with this discussion of race. Is that right?
Well, thank you, Chairman Raskin. So essentially, My contract wasn't terminated. There is a settlement agreement between the district and myself, and so I'm prevented from discussing events pertaining to what happened with the district. But what happened, what initiated against me was much larger than that. It was a group of people, a small group of people that weren't parents of my students, that weren't a large number of them not community members, that raised concerns that I sent out a letter in the wake of George Floyd's murder. They raised concerns that we created a diversity advisory committee. They raised concerns that I would even mention the word systemic racism, because as the gentleman who alleged that I'm promoting critical race theory said at the July 26th board meeting, I'm promoting the conspiracy of critical race theory because of my views and you know, what I had to say in that letter.
I see. Okay, well, and I'll be interested to follow what happens with your case. So let me just ask one final question. I'll turn it over to you, Ms. Mace. Ms. Nossel, so we've talked about the dangers of this great white replacement theory, that the Buffalo mass murderer was jacked up on when he went on his killing spree. What is the best approach to dealing with something like the white replacement theory? Is it to try to censor it and say people can't mention it, or is it to talk about it and to educate people about what's in there and refute its claims? I mean, what's your sense of that?
You know, I absolutely don't think it should be censored. I think it has got to be dealt with in a sensitive way, depending on the age of the students. You know, what the setting is. Is this a history class where it can be explored and examined? You know, we've heard people talk today about the teachers who helped them make sense of all of this. And, you know, for me, that was essential, making sense of horrible chapters in our own history, in international history, understanding motivations, recognizing dangerous, bigoted tides and, you know, what their manifestations may be, the different faces that they show. And so, you know, the idea that we're cabining off discussions of race or even racial superiority, you know, whatever the motivation is, that's counterproductive. We need, in our schools, for kids to be able to explore these things, talk about them, recognize them when they see them, be able to persuade others, and engage in these very difficult topics. So censorship is not the answer.
I mean, it's a striking irony, of course, that critical race theory is being banned all over the country by these states, but white replacement theory is not being banned. But in any event, neither of them should be banned. It's within the realm of ideas, and that means it's within the realm of debate, discussion, inquiry, and empiricism, factual evidence, which ultimately is going to be the antidote to lies. So I appreciate that. Ms. Mesa, you are now recognized for your 5 minutes, liberally speaking.